Welcome to Beer Net Radio. Listen to on every continent except Antarctica.
Are you on?
Beer Net Radio.
You're in a sauna.
I am in a sauna.
Man.
Because I'm steaming.
Last time I was with you, it was sitting on a couch with your dog. Man, you have significantly upgraded your radio. I love it.
I haven't really. I'm just in a different part of the room. And I'm mad at my dog right now. She's in the doghouse. Get it? Nar. And she's, so yeah, I'm at my real desk. How are you, Chris?
Oh, man, I couldn't be better, Harry. There's a lot going on, but busy and, doing good, man. How about you?
I'm doing all right. I got the gout, Chris. I don't want to bore you with all my arthritic problems, but it's slow going over here. All of us on this call, except for you, went to Harry Styles on Monday night, and yeah, I still have a watermelon sugar high, and I'm all that late night talking.
I love it. So you did Harry Styles. I have some of my high school buddies from my little hometown back outside of Hartford, Connecticut, coming in, and we're doing Iron Maiden at Climate Pledge on Thursday night. So
nice.
A little different genre, and they're coming to Seattle. So that's going to be our music entertainment for the week.
Welcome to Beer Net Radio. Now I'm going to get this right. It was Chris Steffanci.
You got it. Wow, that might be the first time in 20 years. Man, hey Jen, well coached.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Yeah,
Good.
That was great. Perfect pronunciation.
Thanks, man. I've been working on that. My
immigrant grandparents would be proud.
That's hilarious. Hey, Chris, I got to jump in and qualify what Harry said earlier. He was not the oldest person at the Harry Styles concert. He was the oldest person crying at the Harry Styles concert. Anyway, proceed.
Well, listen, thanks for being on. I have an announcement to make. Chris Steffanci, he is not only the president and CEO of Columbia Distributing in the Pac Northwest, but he's also a confirmed speaker at this year's Beer Summit.
All right.
January 8th, 9th, and 10th at the Breakers Hotel in Palm Springs. I hope you're there. And Chris, thanks. That's going to round out really nicely. It's hard to get a distributor panel together, so I really appreciate you being on. So why don't, Jen, or why don't you tell us, what's the latest? What's this deal with Scout? What's going on here? You're confusing me.
I know. I love it. Yeah, we're disrupting a little bit. So we're super excited about this relationship with Scout. So basically, I met Jeff Hansen and his team probably about a year and a half ago now. And as you guys know, those guys have a great reputation. They're in Southern Cal, San Diego. They also own Harlan Brewing, craft brewer. And Jeff was St. Archer before that, Boston Beer. So we had a lot of the same friends and ran in a lot of the same circles. And Jeff and I just started spending time together. Started with meeting over coffee, lunch, dinner. We had a bunch of beers and talking about all kinds of opportunities within the distribution side of the business. And at that point, a year and a half ago, as we looked at our own expansion strategy, we want to continue to grow and get bigger, not only in the states we're already in, but in contiguous states, in the Pac Northwest and outside. And we started talking about the opportunity to come into Idaho. And obviously, if there's an opportunity to acquire, that's an easy way into a state. But if you don't have that opportunity, and we feel like Idaho is obviously it's part of the Pac Northwest, very similar to what we see on how you look and manage the business in Oregon and Washington. We have a lot of our suppliers that wanted to go into Idaho that we either had given to other distributors or they haven't gone in yet because they didn't quite have the right model they wanted. And so we thought of a great opportunity of building a primary craft distributor business in Idaho based on the success that Scouts had in Southern California and other markets. I mean, these guys are smart, super creative. They really understand how craft breweries work because they own one. They are a craft brewery. And if you look at the relationships and reputation they built with not only suppliers, but retailers and on-premise retailers, it's great. They understand how to do small really well. Columbia, we don't know how to do small really well, right? We're large and we have a lot of scale. And we thought bringing the talents of both of our organizations together would be a great thing. And by the way, Scout will be the front end of this, the lead. They will manage and operate the business day to day. And we'll provide strategic support and logistics support where we can.
Scout will be the face of it, and then you it sounds like you bring some of your big company best practices to them, and maybe some financing, I'm assuming, to help get this deal done. And then do you see this moving forward, or is just a one-time deal?
No, I mean, like anything else, right? We're, one thing we are at Columbia is opportunistic. And for me, this is a great market. And I mean, Idaho is just an awesome community, right? One of the best craft beer markets in the country, and it's exploding with growth. So for us, Carrie, we're looking at this as a test opportunity to see if this model really works. We think it will, but I can tell you, if this works, why wouldn't we look at it in other markets in other states?
How about talking about alternate models? I got to ask you, Chris, what do you think, especially as a soda distributor, right? What do you think of Blue Cloud?
It's a great question, and it's kind of been the buzz and topic of the industry. You guys have written about it a lot. Listen, I think it's super interesting, right? First of all, as I tell a lot of my peer distributors, never discount Pepsi, right? They're big, they're smart, they have a lot of talented people there. And quite honestly, they partnered with one of the best beer suppliers in the industry, being Boston Beer. So for me, it's an interesting opportunity. I think it's very entrepreneurial, kind of the way they're thinking about building it out. Time will tell the level of success. The one thing that's really interesting to me is the way they're talking about phasing up, right? I mean, we don't have Mountain Dew hard seltzer in our market. We heard it's doing well based on the way that you guys are reporting and others in IRI. But the one thing we all know about the second tier is scale does matter, right? You need brands, you need suppliers, you need scale to be able to ultimately, service the market, at least on the alcohol side, in the way that needs to be done. So I think the portfolio makeup and their portfolio strategy long-term will ultimately dictate the success they have. But listen, they know how to do distribution. They know how to do bottling and manufacturing. They understand consumers. This is one that I know us personally, competitively, we don't take lightly. But I think time is going to tell ultimately how that shakes out. And if they continue to partner in a bigger way with Boston Beer, again, you got a great company who understands the space. They understand great liquids, great packaging, and great marketing. I think we're looking at them as potentially, when they come to the Pac Northwest, as a formidable competitor, because we compete with them on the soda side already.
It sounds to me like you said, middle tier, 100%. It's a scale business. It costs the same whether you're delivering one case, pretty much, or 100. Yeah. So, but it sounds like they're high topping. They are. They're hitting the chains, hitting the off premise. And, there's probably a national need for that. It doesn't scare me, but think about it. A year from now, there will be a national high-topping distributor. And we've been down this road before, and it hasn't really worked in the past. But we also haven't had the second largest beverage company in the world with $250 billion in market cap trying it. So
you're 100% right, Harry, right? And that's why I said, this is a company you don't discount. This isn't just some group of private equity investors who are trying to build out a national footprint, which, as you know, is almost impossible, right? To start from scratch. They already have a national network. They're leveraging it, right? And listen, this convergence is going to happen well outside of just beer and non-alc. But, we've been a non-alc and CSD distributor for a long time. So we've been competing against Pepsi for a long time. Why wouldn't you think at some point they're going to want to compete against us, right? And I think it's the same thing you're going to see. I'm sure we'll talk about spirits and wine and other things, but there's a lot of moves going on right now within categories that specifically were to beer or wine and spirits or non-alc. And the convergence you're seeing with the way consumers are consuming brands is the same convergence you're now seeing at retail and with the second tier and distributors. And it's something we've talked about for a long time and have always tried to get ahead of it strategically.
But do you think they can make a national model work with 12 brands? Because, Emiliano told us, oh, yeah, we're looking at half a dozen, maybe a dozen brands. And I'm thinking, how on earth does that work?
I'll give you my honest assessment of that statement is you're downplaying what the opportunity is to not draw attention to yourself.
Right.
Right. I don't think they can make it work with 12 brands. But if I'm a betting man, and I am, that model is going to have a lot more than 12 brands. And probably, by the way, some other interesting strategic partnerships along the way.
Well, and then they're $12 billion brands. They're not just any brands. I mean,
12 brands with 50,
and they're high topping
500
again.
SKUs. Yeah.
But when I say high topping for those young people listening at home, I'm talking about hitting the highest volume accounts in a market where it's much cheaper, because your cases per drop are much higher, and you can make it work if you're doing that. But if you want to hit the Chinese restaurant that's next to a deli, that's next to, a laundromat that happens to sell craft beer, you're not going to hit those accounts.
Yeah. Well, jumping back to the latest happenings with Columbia, you guys are about to take on the Sazerac portfolio in Washington. How did that come about, and what sort of preparation have y'all done to bring them online next month?
Yeah, great question, Jordan. I mean, it's interesting because when the announcement came out, we got lots of phone calls like, "Oh my God, did this just kind of fall in your lap?" I wish it was that easy. We're not that lucky at Columbia. Maybe some others are. But honestly, back in 2018, 2019, we started a relationship with Sazerac. We actually went to Kentucky, met with Mark Brown and team, and just told them a little bit about who Columbia is, what do we do in the Pac Northwest to try to kind of get on the radar. And it was interesting. Even back then, they talked about, kind of this interesting dynamic of, they have a belief that, the best route to market may not always be with the same parts of portfolio. For example, back then, both RNDC and Southern sold Sazerac brands. And I thought it was such a unique way to think about, and by the way, also a very loyal supplier, but such a unique way to think about, hey, we can bring brands to multiple distributors and be really successful. Let the distributors execute and ultimately let consumers decide. And that really started our relationship. They asked us if we'd be interested in selling what they were creating at the time, kind of this ABA portfolio that they call, which is a lot of malt-based brands. We had a wine-based Fireball. They also have a bunch of spirit brands that are launched in certain markets and not others. We were looking for some well-based spirits. I just thought it was super unique and interesting, the fact that not only did they take an interest in us, they asked us what our white space was and said, hey, can we help you fill some of these holes? And by the way, it wasn't to the detriment of their other partners in the Pac Northwest. And that's where we started the relationship. So this isn't a brand new relationship. We've had it for a while. I think we've performed really, really well. And so when we got the call about, talking about the opportunity to take on, the major part of the portfolio, we had the relationship. We were super excited. Obviously, as you guys know, we've been in the wine and spirits business with Young's Market for decades. We got out of that relationship 5 years ago so that we could strategically get into this space. And, we needed a brand or a supplier to come in that appreciated our model, right? We're never going to have 60 spirit suppliers. That's not our model.
Now that you've said it.
We won't. I can guarantee you that. But we have a model that we have so much scale from different categories that we can bring in the right partners. And the great part for us is, we get a lot of people knocking on our door. We have the luxury of being very specific of the partners that we want to bring in, especially in the wine and spirit space. We did that with Treasury Wine, who's an awesome wine partner of ours. Great portfolio. They work with us. I mean, they really are relationship driven, and we're driving that business really well. Sazerac had the same mentality, right? They wanted to be partners, super transparent. I mean, the way we sat down and talked about the model, the way it's going to work, how it's going to work, was super exciting. And quite honestly, in the 10 years at Columbia, this may be one of the biggest things that's happened to our portfolio. If you think just the size and scale of this business, I mean, it's almost 900,000 cases of incredibly high-end spirits. I mean, it's the largest distillery in the world, fastest growing spirits company in the US at a massive scale. So we couldn't be more excited. We know there's a microscope on us in Colorado, and our friends over at Eagle Rock have a microscope on us. And you guys know me well enough. I love that. We're going to drive this home. We're going to make it successful. We're going to grow and show that, the old days of just looking at us or others as traditional beer distributors is over. We are a full-blown beverage company, and we can play in all categories and do it successfully.
And that malt-based Fireball is not going to hurt.
Right.
It's flying here at HEB.
Those 50 ml, we can't keep them in stock. It's unbelievable. It is amazing, especially when when you execute it properly and you get it on counter space. It really is unbelievable. And the brands that company has are really, really amazing at how they built them over time. And you know, we don't take that lightly. You know, we know we've been given an opportunity and we don't take it lightly.
Bill Goldring, I think, is the single most cosmopolitan bev alc person walking the planet today, because he's got his hands in distribution, beer and wine and spirits, distilling. He's got more bourbon laid or whiskey laid down than anybody else in the world.
Yep.
He's the largest probably distiller now in the world, and definitely the fastest growing.
The number one largest for sure.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Privately
it is.
held.
And you know, it's interesting. I had the opportunity to meet Bill, you know, in my 20s when I was on the supplier side, and after the decision was made and the communication went out, Bill called me, and I got to tell you, now that I'm working even closer with Sazerac, the culture that Bill and Jeffrey and kind of the Goldring family has created in Sazerac bleeds through all of their employees. I mean, this is such a you know, a high integrity, transparent, open company. They care about people. There's loyalty. You know, they don't make, you know, yes, they've made some recent distributor changes, but that's not their MO. And so the cool thing is, having known Bill over the years when I was just a young man in the industry, and even getting the opportunity to talk to him more recently, it really is amazing the legacy and culture that he's built at Sazerac. And again, you know, it bleeds through that organization, and they've been nothing but a great partner.
Well, you were talking about malt-based Fireball, and I wanted to bring that up because y'all operate in areas where spirits can show up in grocery. And so when you think about different versions of Fireball or like Truly Vodka Seltzer coming out, how do you plan to position and market those products in grocery without drawing confusion or cannibalization?
Yeah, well, what we do with everything, Jordan, for me, it's all about a channel strategy, right? The great thing about our portfolio and the geography we cover, so we're a control state in Oregon, right? So wine-based, malt-based works great in Oregon. You know, everything's in government-controlled, state-run stores. So grocery is not an option, not yet, down in Oregon. Washington, obviously you can sell in groceries, right? So spirits. So for us, it's just about a channel strategy. So we do it when we look across beer, wine, spirits, and NA. So for example, you know, typically if you look at the malt-based, wine-based brands we have, very effective in Washington and C stores, right? Typically, the wine and spirit distributors don't cover C stores nearly as effectively as we do. So it's been a massive opportunity, right? You can't sell spirits in C stores stores under 10,000 square feet, which most C stores fall in that category. So for us, it's primarily a wine and beer play. So for us is where we'll leverage wine-based, malt-based will be in C store channel, right? We'll obviously leverage spirit-based in, you know, Costco and in big box grocery is ultimately where we'll strategically place spirit. So the good news is about our legislation and kind of how it works is, because we cover all channels so effectively, we can have a different strategy for every brand in a portfolio and actually win on multiple bases of alcohol, right? Whether it's wine, beer, spirits, or non-alc.
And that's an advantage that the wine and spirits guys, the pure wine and spirits guys don't have. I mean, that you kind of referenced that they can't really cover that wide breadth of accounts that beer guys have, just because of the velocity of beer and the ubiquity of beer.
Yep.
Through the ages.
You're exactly right. And I think that's why more spirit and wine companies, RTDs changed the game, right?
Right.
When you started putting spirit-based and wine-based cocktails in a can, you're obviously coming after beer occasions. And by the way, if I was a wine or spirit supplier, I'd be all over that space too, right? It's a smart strategic move for Gallo and for others to make. The challenge is, once you do that, and you now have a brand in a pack that consumers like, and it drives different occasions, you now have to cover those accounts in a different way than you would when you're in a 750 ml bottle, right? Or a 1 liter bottle of spirits. And so I think that's the challenge is consumers have changed the nature of the game. Retailers and distributors are now responding. And again, I think for primarily beer distributors, based on the nature of their coverage, they're set up massively to succeed in the RTD space. You know, to your point, based on the coverage that a lot of wine and spirits give to what I would call the lower volume, more up and down the street business, Harry, that you referenced earlier when we talked about Pepsi.
No, I was just going to ask, you know, talking about RTDs and, you know, game changing, are we still going to be talking about RTDs as much as we do in 5 years, do you think?
Well, the answer is like, yes, I think we'll be talking about it. You know, the interesting thing is, I think the irony to me is we talk way more about RTDs than we talk about seltzer. And seltzer's so much bigger, right? I know, we always talk about the death of seltzers. I am as bullish, if not more bullish, you guys, last time we talked, I said the same thing. Seltzers are here to stay. They're not going to be replaced. Consumers, by the way, are coming in and out of the category. There's more options, there's more competitive play, but RTDs are good for the industry, right? I think if you have RTDs, whether they're spirit-based, malt-based, wine-based, I think it's good. It's what consumers want. I think the interesting thing is we will be talking about RTDs because they're going to be innovation-led. They're about flavor and quality, which consumers want. And again, I go back to they're in packages that consumers want to consume in, right? Primarily cans. So I think we're going to be talking about RTDs. I personally believe today RTDs are maybe a little bit, you throw around a lot of percentages and everything. I mean, I love this conversation. I'll give you a little tidbit of the Pac Northwest that you'll love. And granted, so High Noon, awesome brand, leading the country, RTD, liquids are good. Gallo's done an awesome job with them. But if you look at just specifically in our market, and I'll give you this in syndicated data, but if you look at it, right, so High Noon's about $1.7 million in Washington in the last 26 weeks. White Claw was 45 million, right? So
I mean,
yeah. So High Noon is 3.7% of White Claw, 2% of the total hard seltzer business. And by the way, as of the end of this month, White Claw will actually be positively growing again in the Pac Northwest. So we saw a big dip. We saw, kind of a stabilization, and now we're seeing growth again. And so I think RTDs are awesome. We sell some, they're great. But I think this whole flavored malt beverage / RTD category are what consumers want. They want flavor, right? Some of them want health and wellness, so they'll go low alcohol, low calorie. But as we've seen with, other brands like Twisted Tea, high alcohol, high calorie works really well too. And it's almost like the spectrum of growth that you see. The interesting thing is I think everything kind of caught in the middle are where you see some of the challenges with some of the trends.
Well, one of the things that I think is going to be fascinating, and a lot of people in this industry get angry about all the wild patchwork of regulation. You could do this in this state, you can't do it in this state, especially people from overseas or Canada. There's like, it really does, though, make it fun, because you don't just say, I'm going to make a brand and it's going to be in this package and there it goes. No, your strategy has to take into part channel marketing in every market's different. And I think it allows players to be profitable that otherwise wouldn't. If Pennsylvania wasn't so fucked up, we wouldn't have a Yingling today. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be real. Let's be 100, as the kids say. So yeah, it is irritating. I get it, folks. It's just a headache. But you know what? Like Carlos Brito told me many years ago, the more regulation, the more money you make. But drop mic. Mic is dropped. Okay, let's go ahead with these.
Yingling's a great example. I mean, you bring up a great point, right? Listen, there's state regulation. Some of it's new, some of it's been around since Prohibition. But at the end of the day, like any business, you got to learn to work within the environment that in the hand you've been dealt, right? And to your point, there's opportunities that would never happen if this was just, kind of this normal, stable business where every single state was the same, everything looked and felt the same. By the way, I would argue you wouldn't have nearly the craft boom that you had over the last several years. The availability in this industry, if you walk into a Seattle grocery store and you see 24 feet and you see how much feet of that is craft, right? And then you go down the aisle, now we got, you got 8+ feet of Constellation, all shelves, right? Great brands selling. To me, it's amazing if you look at the opportunity that small brands continue to have to be able to grow and prosper. And it's kind of like you got to deal with the hand dealt to you. And those who are successful get super creative and find ways to work within that system and ultimately build really great businesses. And there's tons of examples, both on the distributor side and the supplier side of people doing that really well.
Well, Chris, you talk about brands and creativity, and I'm sure you've been privy to some of your suppliers' new brand plans for next year. Anything you can share about things that they're bringing to market that it's exciting to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So it's funny. My wife is weeks away from having a baby.
Oh, congratulations!
Congrats!
Thank you. So
with
funny,
whom?
so I'm sticking close. sticking close to home right now.
Oh.
And so I was on the Molson Coors meeting virtually, and wasn't able to attend New Belgium, for example, either. So it is funny. I will tell you, the sentiment from our team right now, and I know Mike's is coming up and some others, is the energy that they feel is back in the industry. And by the way, this could be from COVID and not really being all together. Obviously, meetings are all, you guys you're going to hold your meeting again in January, Breakers. The way I look at it, though, the energy that was brought back. So I'd start with Molson Coors, right? Their energy in that room, having only watched it again virtually, was great, right? They have great positive news to talk about. Coors Light, Miller Lite, doing well. Coors Banquet on fire. I mean, the Yellowstone thing with Coors Banquet, from my perspective, is awesome. I mean, Coors Banquet's, a major sponsor of the Pendleton Rodeo in Eastern Oregon, which is one of the biggest rodeos in the country. I was able to attend. We had a bunch of Molson Coors folks in town. The amount of attendance, the amount of beer consumption. I mean, I really feel like they're on a momentum run. And one of the things they did really well is innovation. I mean, you look at Topo Chico and Simply, it was a patient innovation rollout that actually got them away from this massive volatility, right? There's just consistent growth within that portfolio. So I got to tell you, in my team, when they came back, probably made me as excited as I was watching it. I think that was great. I mean, you guys talk about New Belgium all the time. They had another great market planning meeting. I mean, if you look at Voodoo, that whole Voodoo series, it's amazing. And they built, they haven't just built a brand with it. It's become iconic. And the way they've innovated off of it has been great. I mean, I was in a meeting with New Belgium in our office last month, and it was interesting to hear them talk about Hispanic consumers, right? Typically a conversation you would have, certainly with Constellation and others, but to hear them talk about insight they have from brands and how they ultimately expand that was great. So I got to tell you, I'm always, you guys know, a pretty optimistic guy, but hearing that, I know Mike's and have some insight on what Mike's is going to share, but the fact that Mike's continues to innovate, certainly they see what's going on in spirit-based RTD space. White Claw, I think, is on a really good momentum kind of swing back up, and their innovation in our market with Surge and Surf, that's all worked really well. So I would say, I almost feel like we're getting our shit together, and there's no better way to say it than COVID was such a crazy time. And even looking at trends and inflation and economy, it's so hard to tell what's real when you start comparing numbers over the last 2 years to what's a real trend, what isn't a real trend, what are retailers telling us. But I got to tell you, I look at our big suppliers. Constellation obviously continues their momentum drive. We are super bullish, and we're in our 2023 planning process right now. And people are coming back from meetings and our annual starting our annual business planning process, way more bullish than we were even a year or two ago.
The people we talked to, like you said, the energy was higher, and they really had some good programs. It's almost like they're learning from Coke how to do things right. I mean, that takes away from Molson Coors, but I mean, it really, they've got a winner there with Topo, with Simply. There's some other secrets that are under embargo that we cannot talk about, but when we do talk about it, you can be sure.
The interesting thing about Molson Coors is they're sticking with their strategy, which for me is having worked at a supplier a lot in my career, it's easy to change course every 3 or 4 months. As the wind blows, you chase the next bright, shiny object. The thing I like the most about Molson Coors' strategy is they have declared they are a beverage company, similar to what Columbia did a few years ago. We're not an alc company. We're a beverage company, and sticking with non-alc, thinking about spirits and other places they can play. It's easy to walk away from that if you don't see a home run overnight, right? You win that game by hitting a bunch of singles and gaining confidence and really engaging the network in a different way. I love that they're staying true to that strategy, and it's going to benefit them long term, especially again as consumers continue to change the way they drink, the way they look at brands, the way they interact with brands. And you just listen to MSJ and the energy she brought talking about marketing. It's hard not to bet on them in a big way.
Yes. Well, you were talking about, comparing things to COVID. And I remember when we spoke about exactly a year ago, you said that you guys did about 81 million cases, but you basically could have done another decent sized wholesaler's worth if you had all your stock, right? So how's that looking this year?
Way better. So great question. Yeah, I think I shared the number with you last year. And this wasn't necessarily related to sales out of stocks, but of all the orders that were submitted over the year, it was about 14 million cases that we actually shorted retailers in a given day. It doesn't mean that was lost sales, but you could equate 10% of that maybe to lost sales. So much better. We are still having supply chain challenges, no doubt about it. Parts of our non-alc portfolio, parts of our beer portfolio still. I know Heineken's really had a tough run. And again, I'll say the same thing now I did before. These are things that no one can control, right? Heineken doesn't want to not sell more beer, and obviously with where they got to get beer from, especially overseas and transport's really tough. So it is, Jen, way better. We're not dealing with the frustration. And the issue with out of stocks for us was knowing the suppliers are doing everything they could on their side to fix it. The biggest challenge for us was just the retailer retaliation that our teams were dealing with, right? You're a rep, and every time you walk in, you tell somebody, we didn't have Modelo, or ran out of a Corona 12 pack, or out of Coors Light. The suppliers and even us as senior executives and distributors, we don't get hit with that. It's our salespeople who are on the street fighting for us every day. And the fact that was so much better this summer, just for us, it was a massive culture change. And again, we're still having some out of stock, but nowhere near what we used to have. So, and again, if you understand the way supply chain has worked the last couple of years, and you guys obviously understand breweries and Mexico, Amsterdam, you name it, it has been a massive challenge. But I always go back to the fact of the matter is every supplier wants to sell as much beer as possible. So the one thing we've never gotten into is finger pointing. We know they want to help us any way they can, and a lot of them went way above and beyond. But it's just the nature of what the world dealt with the last couple of years. But we're still dealing with it on trucks and trailers. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet on this.
What about drivers?
Labor's been the biggest issue. I think I talked to you a year ago. It was the biggest issue then, still the biggest issue. Biggest issue, so drivers is a big issue, warehouse and merchandising a much bigger issue. So I'll give you a great example. I literally get an update every day, and we have 2,800 employees, and I get an update every day on kind of our FTEs. And one of our markets, we have budgeted 120 merchandisers that should be on our payroll any given day. 2 weeks ago, it was down to 40. So if you think about just the amount of the challenge is there's not enough people in the workforce to actually bring in, and we increased our wages $5 million over the last 12 months, primarily in merch and warehouse jobs. So we threw money at it. It helped, didn't fix the problem, but helped. Retention has gotten better, so that's good. But what we're finding is once people stay 90 to 100 days in working here, we have a better chance of keeping them. The challenge is these are, I started in merchandising. These are not easy jobs. And by the way, when I started in merchandising, I worked for a Coors distributor at the time, CDC in Anaheim, now Reyes. But it was a summer job, and I think I managed 700-800 SKUs at most. You look at our business and coming in with non-alc, wine, spirits, we do coffee, right? So there's other things that we do. And it's just, these are hard jobs. So when people come in and realize working in a night warehouse or merchandising, they do it for a week and are like, this just isn't for me. And I can go make just as much money not doing all the manual labor somewhere else. So Harry, I think this is going to continue to be an issue well into the future, especially, depending on how you define recession, or are we in one or going into one. It's a massive, and I know it's not just me, it's every distributor across the country is dealing with the same issues.
I saw a YouTube channel a few weeks ago, and it was the channel's just devoted to food service drivers and how they can game the Coke and Pepsi and beer wholesaler and food service all against each other to get the best pay for the job.
By the way, we're feeling that. I mean, there's not a day a merchandiser isn't in a store where they're getting handed, business cards and poach. I mean, quite honestly, we'll do the same thing if it can help us get labor. But it is the worst labor environment I've ever seen in any job or any company I've ever worked at.
You mentioned whether or not we're going into a recession. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I was an economics major, and I always went with the standard definition of two quarters of negative GDP. You're in a recession now, and different politicians decide to manage that definition differently.
Transitory.
Yeah, right. So for me, if you look at, obviously huge labor issues, look at where the stock market is. I don't know. I'm not a professional economist. I can tell you, it's tough from a labor market perspective. I will tell you though, and if you look at, I think, consumer spending, right, we're able to take some price to cover that. Not all of it. We're going up in October, but we've been very surgical about pricing, more so than we have in the past. Very strategic, specific channels, specific packages versus more of a blanket, larger price increase. So that helps a little bit. But the other good news is we're still seeing premiumization. So consumers are still buying seltzers, are still buying craft beer. Our local and regional craft has really kind of come back and is growing again. And it's interesting because if you look at the craft business, you look at kind of imperial IPAs in our market, single serves are huge, right? Especially 19-ounce single serves are huge, and they're expensive because they're high in alcohol. But that's the part of the category that's really growing. So again, it's hard to compare versus prior years to see the impact of inflation. But so far, I would say today, we feel pretty good about consumer spending. And the fact of the matter is our business total volume is up. We're growing, not as fast as we grew the last 2 years for sure. But again, there's so much noise in the system. It's really hard to make a good analytical assessment on what's really going on.
We do enjoy a very nice mix shift component to our average price per case in this industry. And we have for the past, 10 years. When you're talking about the inflation, it's weird that beer is only at about 0.5% of inflation that other food and CPG is witnessing. And I've been thinking about that. And is it because of exactly what the government has accused the industry of, is because we're so competitive. And the government's saying that this industry is anti-competitive. But, there's no padding on pricing. I don't see people lopping on extra pricing because you can't. The guy across the street is not doing it, right?
You're 100% right. You just answered the $1 million question, which is, you're right. This is so competitive, right? Yeah, you're worried about consumer spending and disposable income. But at the end of the day, our suppliers look at their own pricing strategy and they're basing it on their competitive set, right? They want gaps between how they look at competitors, and some want bigger gaps, smaller gaps. But which is why you got to be more surgical in pricing now than you ever have, because I can tell you, while we control pricing, all our suppliers have different pricing strategies, right? And we try to make sure that we take all of that into consideration when looking at price. Oh, and by the way, retailers all have a real perspective on that too, right? Yeah. So just trying to understand the price dynamic. And again, because of the inflationary period we're in, I think at least our perspective has been, we've been a lot more cautious than aggressive. And there's times to be aggressive. We've been a lot more cautious on looking at price than we have been in the last couple of years.
Well, Chris, I have, 2 more questions. My last question will be what you're going to be for Halloween. But before that, I want to know, you guys you're always looking vertically and, up, down, all around. What's new? What do you guys have up your sleeve? What else are you working on? What do people not know yet?
Well, some I probably can't talk about. It would be really bad. But listen.
No, just do it. Live a little. Just live a little, Chris. Have some fun.
As you know, I live a little more than a lot as far as my openness and transparency.
True. Thank you, Chris.
I might have been accused for maybe too much. But Jen, to answer your question, honestly, we're always looking at opportunities, right? There's a couple things we spend a lot of time on. One is we look at merger and acquisition strategy, right? We want to continue to grow organically, inorganically, and we have a really good kind of roadmap for markets and states that we want to continue to get bigger. So we're always kind of looking at opportunities there. The other piece is we always also look at our strategic portfolio, right? So we have this portfolio architecture is what we call it, but basically it's a big map of all the brands we have in different categories and different price points, and we identify white space. I think I shared this with you guys, a year ago. And so we're looking at things a little differently within that white space. So for example, if there's a white space that we have and it can't be fulfilled by a supplier or somebody else, we're actually now going to suppliers saying, hey, do you guys want to partner on filling this white space? We could do it locally, regionally, whatever. And so we're having really, what used to be supplier-led innovation conversations are much more now kind of a mutual conversation. And we're talking about with a lot of our suppliers. I think they're so much more open-minded to be outside of what I would call traditional beer space. And a lot of times they're looking for regional insight, right? What we may know about our market that could be different. And for me, that's been super exciting because we're now patching and filling this white space and having conversations with, Deschutes, Sierra Nevada, others that we haven't really talked to about this kind of stuff before. And it's been great. So I think that's kind of the pillar number 2 for us. And 3 for me, and you mentioned it, is, vertical integration. We're looking at, we look at how do we become more efficient in trucking? We bought a third-party trucking company about 8 months ago, which has just been awesome. We're working with Constellation and Molson Coors on how do we help solve mutual problems in transportation. And by the way, how do we save them money, and how do we make money as we're doing it? So those three things are probably where I spend the majority of my time right now, is really trying to understand what's next for Columbia. And you know, the one thing we always say is we don't ever want to be, if you're complacent, you're losing in this industry. I'm not sure I could go as far as saying we're cutting edge, but I will tell you, we're always trying to understand where consumers are going, where retailers are going, and where our suppliers are going. And if we can help get there in 2 years instead of 5, or a little ahead of the industry. And honestly, I think we have been with our total beverage strategy. We've been doing this for a long time. So when Molson Coors and others said they want to be in non-alc, we're like, we're ready. When Sazerac called and said, do you guys know how to do spirits? We said, we're ready, right? So a lot of these opportunities recently that we've been given have been because we've really had a good long-term strategy that we stuck to.
It does seem like there's kind of a divide, and I mean culturally, and this is making it very simplistic, but you're either a distributor that's just trying to make as much cash flow as you can, and you're probably in the back of your mind thinking, this generation's probably gonna sell out at some point. Right. And plus you've got 8 cousins running around creating havoc. You've got an uncle drunk on the golf course making, you know the problems. Yeah. And then you have kind of professionally run where they're actually trying to be more collaborative and like you said, move to that next step, which is becoming a total beverage distributor. And we're seeing that dichotomy work its way. And I think in the next 10 years, that's kind of going to be how things play out. You're either on one side of the fence or another. And I mean, do you agree with that kind of assessment in general? I
do. I think I would have defined it the exact same way. The good news is, if you're on the side that decides to, again, kind of get into multi-categories and leverage the opportunity all of this consumer convergence provides, it also is going to offer you the opportunity for those that ultimately don't want to go down that path and sell. It also allows you to get bigger through consolidation that way. But I couldn't agree more, Harry. I think consolidation in this industry is going to be driven by exactly what you just said. Those who have the energy and really want to, because I mean, to your point, this is an investment strategy. This isn't milk the business strategy. And so if you have an investment strategy and you can do it long-term, I think the opportunities are going to be endless. I don't think there's going to be 5 beer distributors or beverage distributors eventually, but I guarantee there's going to be a lot less than there is today, based on the fact that some have the energy and want to do it, and others, just think maybe now is the right time to get out.
I tell you one thing, if you guys sell beer to baristas, and if you can do that, if you can pull that off consistently, then you're good at selling beer. I don't care who. That's all there are up there, right? Just a bunch of baristas and
that's it. Only baristas. Yeah,
and
just
slackers.
A city full of baristas.
That's just how I think of that area of the country. Just a bunch of slackers.
We gotta get you up here and spend a little time up here.
I know it has been too long. I do enjoy. I actually like the rain, and I like that kind of weather. So I'll be up.
Well, we're coming into your season then over the next few months.
Yeah. Well, we've kept you on too long, and as usual, great intel. We're looking forward to seeing you, Chris. I thank you for drinking and selling beer and beverages and dry coffee and whatever the hell else you got going out of that
dry
warehouse.
Coffee.
Jeez.
Dry shampoo, whatever else you may
listen, I'm speaking out of school a little bit, but my son is a merchandiser for an Anheuser-Busch distributor as we speak. He went 6 months merchandising there, and he didn't know they sold Ghost. He went 6 months they without merchandising that brand in whatever stores he had. So I mean, that's just you multiply that times 700, and that you're seeing that kind of stuff all over the country. And I think we're going through a retraining in the beer side with new categories coming in.
Harry, I love you for so many reasons, including you're the other one who's very not afraid to say what's on his mind. And I hope you just didn't get your son fired, but wants to move to the Pac Northwest, happy to hire him up here.
Right.
The good news is we don't have Ghost. We actually have Red Bull, which is probably
right. It sells itself. You don't have to merchandise it. Well, but the thing is that, like you said, he's a merchandiser. He can fog a mirror. They don't care if he doesn't merchandise at all, as long as he shows up.
That is 100% accurate for sure.
So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks, guys. And have a good week the rest of the week. And hey, we'll shout at you in the next coming months to get a plan. We're going to lay a good plan down because we're going to make it dynamic. We're going to make it exciting. Our panel on distributors, we're going to make it fun. We're going to make it all the things. I mean, people are just going to minds blown all over the stage, beer flowing. I don't even. I'm told too much. I've said too much.
Good. I'm taking the fact that you just said that I am not. You're not going to frown upon me when I get on the stage with the beer.
No, hell no. Hell, I'm gonna have fireball shots for
That's
everybody.
what I was gonna say.
I would be happy to participate in that. It is an awesome brand, and yeah, that's great.
Yeah. People say, why do you report on Monster and Fireball and all that? I said, look, it takes a lot of beer to sell Fireball. So.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
All right, guys. We'll take care, and we'll catch you on the Flipper Fly.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys in Florida. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
All right,
Chris.
See ya. Thanks.
Yeah, bye-bye.